we have long in this ecosystem been, financially incentivizing new kinds of human coordination and behavior. But much of this is built on just capital efficiency, sometimes lovingly referred to as Ponzi-nomics. And so I am really excited about the future of crypto, where we are coordinating around more than financial assets, where we're able to optimize for human delight, value, saving time, diminishing the effort and search to find the things that we want, the experiences that we're looking for.
Hey everybody, Tanner here with WAGMI Ventures. On today's episode, we have Evin McMullen, co-founder and CEO of Disco. For anyone who's new, this is the WAGMI Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting founders from across Web3. Check out wagmiventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. But for now, let's get into it with Evin at Disco. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm here today with Evin McMullen, co-founder and CEO of Disco. Evin, how's it going today?
Jam, Tanner. Thank you so much for having me. It's another beautiful day here in the metaverse, and I'm so excited to join you.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited to talk. And before we jump into all the cool work happening at Disco, I think I really would love to learn a little bit more about your story a bit, and maybe just start with kind of what's animating that work at Disco. So, and kind of learning a little bit about your story. It looks like you graduated from Yale 2012, bachelor's in anthropology of information systems. And that was really interesting. So I was curious, could you just tell us a little bit of what that path of study consisted of, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the impact it had on the trajectory of your interests and thinking?
Absolutely. So when I was an undergrad, I started off in engineering and sort of learned, as one does in school, taking classes that might not be, immediately on track or obvious to you. I went with a roommate to take an anthropology class and learned about the frameworks that people like Margaret Mead used to study remote communities and civilizations and to document the different patterns of behavior and interaction between people in these spaces. And so I thought, what a cool framework. I wonder if we could use those strategies to study how people are gathering online. So this was like 2008 to 2012, sort of the dawn of modern social media as we know it today with Facebook, and later on, Instagram and then Snapchat. And so the professors who I did research work with would jokingly refer to my line of study as Reddit for credit, because it was hilarious. I, was doing linguistic analysis on the, posts and content throughout the day, based on different types of subject matter, on Twitter, on Reddit, on Facebook, and actually had the opportunity to meet Alexis Ohanian, one of the co-founders of Reddit, while I was in school. Very cool. Time, he was working on a project called Bread Pig and another one called Hipmunk, which was a travel search engine. But it was a pretty outstanding opportunity for me to realize that my fascination with people coordinating in digital spaces actually, looked a lot like the way that we have studied human beings for many years.
Fascinating. Yeah, I love it. So going back even a little bit further, I came across a Medium article where it talks about how you really got excited exploring technology from a really young age, even around like the Napster era. And I loved that call out to Napster I feel like for a lot of people, I think you and I are around the same age. That was kind of our first introduction to anything decentralized, even if it was file sharing, right? So I'm curious, how did that movement around file sharing and freedom around data, intellectual property impact your perspective over the years too? Did that dovetail at all with some of the thinking later?
So when I was probably in fourth grade, this is the late 90s, MP3 players started to become popular. Things like the Rio music player. This is pre-iPod. And platforms like Napster allowed for P2P file sharing in a way that had never existed before. And so many of my friends were listening to burned CDs of their early MP3 players with all sorts of cool new music. So as a little kid, I wanted to participate in this too. I thought this was really nifty. And my father is an intellectual property attorney who, has dealt with quite a lot of his practice in digital content. And so in order to start playing with these tools like my peers, I had to present to my parents why my proposed use of this technology constituted an educational, non-financial use case and thus qualified under the fair use statute as permissible use of protected intellectual property.
That is incredible.
Yeah. So, Black's Law Dictionary was a childhood book of mine. But in addition to that, I also, actually a family member of mine was working at AOL at the time and still to this day has a close relationship with Sean Parker. And so it was very sort of close to my realm that people building on these ideas and, offering these different ways of interactions were very much close to my own lived experience. And so when I got to college, that was around when DJs like Girl Talk, Greg Gillis were coming into vogue, and, mashups from DJ Earworm combined multiple songs into these long mixes that are now really commonplace in music. But it was around that time that Creative Commons licenses and questions around remix culture and the legal permissibility of derivative creative works was kind of called into question. We had seen in the Napster era, the RIA going after individuals who had been sharing files. And then we started to see, artists and their attempts to remix and recreate derivative works falling into a similar line of fire. And so it was through that interest, enthusiasm, and some of my computer science classmates that we actually started the chapter of Students for Free Culture at Yale. So a group of students specifically focused on intellectual property reform and the freedom of data and information. And it's sort of through that group of nerds, we took a lot of classes together and eventually ended up discovering decentralized technologies and Bitcoin together.
Amazing. That's actually fascinating how that all kind of comes together and is really coherent. So I want to bring us up to kind of present day with Disco, because I know there's a ton of awesome stuff we can talk about with Disco. So after graduating, you had a bunch of really interesting positions across product marketing and business development, strategy. So I'm curious, what was it sounds like you were already really primed for, what was to come with Web3, but I'm curious, how did your professional work after Yale really lead you to crypto, and what drew you to the space to make the jump to consensus back in 2017?
So my first job out of school was a little non-traditional for folks who work in the technology and protocol development space. I actually, worked producing creative content at a studio in Hollywood with one of Bob Dylan's sons. And it is through that experience, that team touched everything from music videos to television commercials to launching IBM Watson and working with CERN and the Large Hadron Collider. And so the breadth of that opportunity taught me the importance of narrative, that a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end where the viewer can see themselves as the hero invites people to be open to new ideas in a way that they are not when they're simply reading or when they're presented with a less connective storyline. And so it was through watching the process of production and leading that process for everyone from Sheryl Sandberg and the launch of Lean In to, George Soros and the Open Society Foundations that I realized that, storytelling is at the heart of every brand, every object, every protocol, that every company is a media company, and that no product or experience starts at step one of the user journey. You are starting in the middle of someone else's journey, in the middle of their story. And it is, your job as a product leader, a product owner, to introduce your offering inside of the story that people are already living. After that work, I had the opportunity to spend the formative years of my career working in hardware and connected experience development with a team based out of Berlin. So that afforded me the opportunity to work on connected home hardware, such as toothbrushes, connected mirrors, even autonomous vehicles. And so it was through that work that I started to build out systems that would allow for different companies, different entities to exchange data about their users and offer users an improved experience. So for example, toothbrushes that enabled you as a user to share your brushing data with your dentist and with your dental insurance company to receive discounts on dental care premiums for insurance and to receive free brush heads. And so it was through building out systems that were logically centralized around the individual user, but didn't necessarily involve their consent, active participation, or ability to move data beyond, those sort of bounded silos one place to another, that really made me think about the distribution of networks like Bitcoin. And realizing that the ability to have distributed computing and the ability to process, not only information, but also compute in a more efficient manner could allow us to build much, much larger networks of interoperability, as opposed to just two entities, a doctor's office and an insurance company, exchanging data via API, sort of through this toothbrush experience. So even, with very sort of tangible, concrete, connected hardware, it became really evident to me that the blocker for awesome experiences that involve technology is often identity, meaning the ability to move data with you when you go from one place to another, one app to another, physical space into digital space and back. And so after working for a little while with another one of my computer science professors at Berkshire Hathaway in a much more formal environment, wearing a suit every day, I learned that you could go pro in crypto. I didn't realize that, people could work full time in Web3. Then it sort of had adopted that name. And so when I learned that, I thought that was just about the coolest thing in the world and was really excited to join a company called Consensus, a sort of leading venture studio in the Ethereum development space. Spent a little over 4 years there and had the opportunity to see enterprise implementations and sort of run, head first into the wall of the fact that we have very limited data about addresses in Web3. If the only thing we know about one another is how many tokens that we have, it's very easy to coordinate straightforward things in DeFi, but a little more challenging to do things like under collateralized loans or build non-financial applications with utility if the contextual information about different users, different identifiers is not readily available. And so I was really excited about a year and a half ago now to introduce Disco to the world, where you are the multifaceted center of the party and you can reflect your data and your identity to the world however you decide. So with Disco, we wanted to make it really easy for developers to issue and manage credentials via API, and for individuals to extend the capabilities of their existing wallets, adding some new superpowers so they can carry around more than just tokens when they move from one dApp to another.
Amazing. Okay. So let's dive in kind of a little bit more on some of those details, where I'd love if you could just explain a little bit how decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials work within Disco.
So if we do a little history lesson first, we think about the early internet. That really started off as a bunch of intranets, networks that were specific to universities or companies, but kind of internal to them. They weren't able to talk to each other, couldn't cross the boundary outside of their silo, outside of their walls. And so it was the early internet that we know and love today with protocols like HTTPS and TCP/IP that made it easy for those intranets to become the internet, to connect to each other, to provide a shared set of rails, a shared language, and move information from one space to another more freely. Today, we are in a very similar architectural moment of evolution in the Web3 space. We have many different blockchains, sort of like intranets, and now we are endeavoring to build out a multi-chain present and future, from scaling solutions like L2s to alternative L1s to non-EVM chains and beyond. And so what I find really exciting about decentralized identifiers is that, like the URL, they are a method from the World Wide Web Consortium, people that, run the internet, and they were created to make it easy to identify other parties and communicate with them. So actually, decentralized identifiers are the latest identifier from the W3C since the URL. So it's been a minute since we've gotten some new technology from these folks. So very exciting there. A decentralized identifier allows you to take an existing pair of keys. You can use more than 150 different kinds, Ethereum, Bitcoin, PGP, and you can essentially derive another set of keys from them so that you can use your existing key pair to send and receive messages to other key pairs that are not from the same protocol as you. So an Ethereum address can exchange interactions, with an Optimism address or even a Bitcoin address or a PGP key or an address that's based on, a Web2 identifier. So we have a lot of hypothetical composability here. Very exciting that, we've got these identifiers ready to talk to each other, but what is that shared language? So verifiable credentials are kind of like off-chain NFTs or self-contained blockchains. They're a statement, a set of code, a JSON file written by one set of keys about itself or about another and signed by the party that said it. So this statement is kind of like a diploma. It's written by one party about another. Once it's written about that subject, it will always be written about that subject. And anyone who wants to understand what that statement was, who said it, can simply look at the signature and see who said what about whom when. Verifiable credentials, like tokens, can be used for access control to smart contracts across chains, to physical spaces, to e-commerce discounts, Telegram chats, Discord channels, Google Docs, and more. But unlike tokens, they are natively non-transferable. They are gas-free. They are natively multi-chain, meaning that I can leverage a credential in my interaction in the Ethereum space. I can immediately swap my RPC endpoint to Optimism, and then I can immediately use that credential again right away in a smart contract interaction without needing to use a bridge or translate any of that data. So today in Disco, decentralized identifiers are the data backpacks, the sort of personal data sequencers that allow you to manage the credentials written about you. Verifiable credentials are the digital version of the plastic ID cards in your wallet that allow you to keep track of your actions within apps, to receive notes from others, to define your personal preferences, and to allow your credentials, the data that you represent, to inform your experiences and apps to allow them to customize around you. Rather than asking you, what's your email address or what's your specific identifier, instead of asking, what's your data, we ask, does your data fit the requirements? And so this allows us to have essentially listless, allowless, different methods of access control that are moderated by tokens alongside this other primitive of verifiable credentials. So DIDs and VCs taken together allow us to extend the capabilities of our existing key pairs in Web3 so we can pass signed notes to each other that are Web3 interaction ready, but don't have to necessarily be stored on a blockchain.
Fascinating. I love it. Okay. So here we are, Q3 2023, kind of this moment in the market cycle as well. I'm curious, from your vantage point, what are the biggest opportunities as well as maybe like biggest obstacles for Disco right now? How are you seeing both of those kind of play out?
We live in an attestation nation right now, so it's the perfect time for a disco. What I mean by that is that with the proliferation of layer twos, abundant block space as far as the eye can see, and the need for apps with, non-financial utility for the millions of users to come, we are going to need some more data. Not only do we need more data, but that data needs to be in an interoperable form that can move with us from one context to another, that is not trapped to a single underlying chain, and that can be updated because we change and evolve. We're human beings. We are not fixed and public and permanent. So with Disco, we see this moment of growth and scaling and opportunity as one that's really well suited to our infrastructure. Disco makes it easy to programmatically issue credentials, basically drop credentials, based on in a user's backpack based on the actions they do in-app and on-chain and other different environments and interactions. And so we see a huge opportunity here to start enabling the types of, self-controlled or user-controlled data that can make social discoverability easy. Things like attaching social identifiers from Web 2 to your data backpack. Things like your personal preferences, your interests, the communities that you're part of. So social discoverability offers a really cool opportunity here. Another one that is coming sort of at the end of the year, but for which we are excited and prepared, is a different regulatory landscape. So from MiCA to GDPR to a number of laws that are still in development, we see different ways that the legal management of data can impact the Web3 ecosystem for good and for more challenging. And so Disco's tools are here to make it easy so that we are able to perform, the types of processes we want for our users, but in a way that is not going to incur unnecessary risk or harm to them. In terms of challenges coming up, one continuous challenge that we have is education. A lot of folks in Web3, especially those who, may have come into the NFT space, may not have as holistic of a background in, different kinds of protocol development or, software engineering systems or management of personal data. A lot of folks do not realize that, data that doesn't necessarily live on a blockchain can still be used to inform that blockchain. And that off-chain but on-chain aware data, meaning data written by keys that come from a blockchain about keys that live on a blockchain that can be used for smart contract interactions with the blockchain, that, these capabilities can improve interoperability. They can decrease the cost of gas and make onboarding much more straightforward and easy, especially for the half of the world that does not have formal government documents to allow them to use a traditional fiat on-ramp.
Love it. Okay. So recurring question for you here, Evin, comes up all the time on the podcast. If I were to say the future of crypto is blank, how would you fill in the blank?
The future of crypto is fun. We have long in this ecosystem been, financially incentivizing new kinds of human coordination and behavior, but much of this is built on just capital efficiency, sometimes lovingly referred to as Ponzi-nomics. And so I am really excited about the future of crypto, where we are coordinating around more than financial assets, where we're able to optimize for human delight, value, saving time, diminishing the effort and search to find the things that we want, the experiences that we're looking for. So I would say the future of crypto is fun.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. Couple last questions here for you, Evin. I'm curious your most generalizable advice for founders in this space where, whether it's for folks who are brand new or kind of speaking to your peers, like what have you learned over the past several years as a founder that would be valuable? And maybe too, like what would you, maybe if you had a time machine, want to go back and kind of impart to yourself as a valuable insight or worthwhile lesson?
So I have two pieces of advice. One, is that blockchains are a multiplayer game. That is very literal from a protocol level, an infrastructure level, right? Like you necessarily cannot have a blockchain by yourself. That's a database. And so we, need those operators. And similarly, when we run out into the world to build in Web3, it is best to go with friends, to build together, because our ecosystem of technology is composable, and so too must our team dynamics and ability to collaborate. And so I would, remind everyone, blockchains are multiplayer games, so it's much more fun if you bring a friend. And my second piece of advice is, no matter how hydrated you think you are, you need another glass of water.
That's great advice. Okay. Evin, what is your team working on right now? And what is the best way for people to follow along on the journey?
So right now, I'm really excited. Our team actually just this morning rolled out a new capability that we are calling bookmarks. So for those organizations that have newsletters, creators who have newsletters and want to embed a little treat for their readers, bookmarks allow you to simply click a link inside of a newsletter to claim a credential, a bookmark related to that newsletter that links back to the content. And it's sort of similar to the digital version of being able to put a cool magazine on your coffee table at home. So not only does this make it easier for creators to relate the wallets of their readers to the distribution of their email list, but it also allows readers to raise their hand and to signal in Web3 native spaces that they are indeed a reader of this particular content, and just to demonstrate a different facet of how they're showing up in the community. So that was a fun one that we rolled out this morning. And if you want to follow along with us at the Disco, you're interested in any of the experiments that we talked about today, I'm so excited to welcome you and to share even more about what we're building. You can always find us on Twitter at DiscoXYZ. Tell us your metaverse dreams and visit our website at disco.xyz, where you can also get started with your data backpack by connecting your wallet in one click. You can also follow me on Twitter at Proven Authority. My DMs are always open for your metaverse dreams.
Amazing. Evin, thank you so much for your time. This is a really fascinating snapshot at the cool work happening at Disco, and I can't wait to follow along. So thank you so much for the time, and have a great rest of your week here.
Tanner, an absolute privilege. Looking forward to seeing you in the metaverse.
Definitely. Okay. Bye-bye.